Hi, this is Eddie, and welcome to the Hamilton edition of Eddie's podcast. This entire podcast will be dedicated to a discussion about Hamilton the musical, which will be released next Friday, July 3rd on Disney Plus for everyone.
Do something that matters. Do something that matters. Welcome to the Eddie Podcast. Welcome to Eddie Podcast. Welcome to the Eddie Podcast. Welcome to the Eddie Podcast.
I would like to dedicate this podcast to my wife, Jacquie, because next week is her birthday, and we actually had tickets to see Hamilton on Broadway. Now, in preparation for that, I had a friend, James Monroe Iglehart, send Jacquie a little message that I was supposed to show her the morning of her birthday while we were in New York on our way to see Hamilton. Unfortunately, those plans will be delayed. But here is Tony Award-winning Broadway actor James Monroe Iglehart with a special message for Jacquie.
Hello, Jacquie, and a happy birthday from me, James Monroe Iglehart, a Lafayette Jefferson here on Broadway in Hamilton, and your beautiful and wonderful husband, Eddie. He's bringing you to the show for your birthday. So I just want to say your husband is actually really, really cool. He's a great birthday present just for you. And me here, I just want to say happy birthday, girl. See you soon in Broadway.
Before we get into our Superfan Roundtable, our first guest, the immediate past president of the Florida Bar and Broadway superfan, Michelle Suskauer. Michelle, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me.
Are you as excited as everybody else about the news that Hamilton is coming out a year and 3 months early?
I am thrilled. I'm glad that it will be out for everybody to enjoy. So that's really exciting.
Are there any characters that you relate to?
I think probably Angelica. I just seem to relate to her. She's very strong. She's family oriented. She'd do whatever she could do for her sister, and yet she's very passionate and very, very smart and very tough. So yes, I think I relate more to her.
Do you want to answer some trivia questions and see what level of a Hamilton expert you are?
Oh gosh,
or do you want to skip this
Hamilton
part?
fan. Sure. Okay. All right. I'm gonna try. I mean, I didn't prep for this, so you may stop me. So start easy, okay?
Here's an easy one. True or false? Was Jonathan Groff the first person to play King George?
Actually, if you're not being specific because you didn't say whether it was on Broadway or at the Public. So if it was at the Public, no, he is not the first.
Where was Hamilton born?
Hamilton was born on Curacao?
Nevis in the Caribbean.
Oh,
Dropped in the Caribbean.
Right. Well, island. It's an island in the Caribbean. Okay.
What scandalous circumstance was Hamilton born into?
So he was born, his mother was not, I guess she was a single mother, born out of wedlock, and then she ended up marrying somebody else.
I think you got it. His mother was married to someone who wasn't his father. Hamilton came to America to study where?
Well, he came to America, he went to New York, and he ended up studying at King's College.
Exactly. Let me just ask, Is there anything else you want to convey?
Okay. I'll tell you that there are times when, I had to run for my position as president, and I was just one of I love power walking, and so I would sort of measure my walk by, listening to, a lot of the soundtrack. And there are just some parts that just really pumped me up. And it's just, but I think it really sort of weaves into the fabric. It's the fabric of this country. And so it resonates with everyone that sees it. And that's why I'm so excited that it's being released so that so many people can see it and enjoy it, especially during this time right now.
Thank you, Michelle, for your insight and perspective on Hamilton. Now we're going to turn our attention to our super fan roundtable. I have assembled a group of people who know Hamilton even better than myself. One of them, my law partner, Caryn A. Stephens, is responsible for bringing me into the world of Hamilton with her constant persistence. So with Caryn A. Stephens, her husband, Dave Hare, and my wife, Jacquie Stephens, please enjoy this superfan Hamilton roundtable. Looking at the gallery view here, let's go around the boxes and introduce everybody and say who you are.
Hi, I'm Caryn Stephens.
Hi, I'm David Hare.
Hi, I'm Jacquie Stephens.
Let's go around and say why we started liking Hamilton.
We were huge Broadway fans, and back when Dave and I first started dating before we got married, I told him that if he didn't like the theater, it wasn't going to work. So
luckily I did already.
So we consistently went to New York a couple times a year the whole time we dated and everything like that. So we'd always go up and see new shows. And I had heard rumblings about Hamilton. I date back to back in the day when I saw Lynn on Broadway and In the Heights. So I had seen him, Christopher Jackson, the whole original cast of In the Heights, and I was obsessed with his style and his how he wrote a show. It was just amazing. And In the Heights was not as widely accepted as Hamilton has been, but it was an incredible show. So I got obsessed with him then, and I would always follow him. And then we heard about this Hamilton thing starting, and I think we were watching the Tonys that year, and I was like, this looks amazing. We need to get to New York to see that. And then you started looking for tickets.
Yeah, we tried. It was very difficult to find tickets, as everyone knows. And eventually, one of my best friends had a wedding in Chicago, and this was a few years after, I guess. But I was able to obtain Hamilton tickets for the Chicago performances at the day after the wedding we were attending there. So it was kind of like, oh, come to this wedding with me, but we get to see Hamilton too for the first time.
As a footnote, it was
in the orchestra.
It was December in Chicago, so there was not much. Yeah, so that was pretty much the only way. Yeah, not that we don't love his friend and his wife, but that was how I got to go to Chicago.
It snowed on our walk over to the show from the hotel.
Aaron Burr.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were covered in ice, but that was when we first saw Hamilton for the first time. We were sitting maybe 8 or 9 rows back from the front in Chicago and saw the original Chicago cast. Lynn did not make an appearance that day, unfortunately, but we saw the original Chicago folks. They'd only been open a few months.
It started in November. We saw it early December.
And we were hooked, and that was pretty much the beginning of the end of this obsession. And we subsequently have seen it 3 more times.
At least 3. I don't know.
And one with you lovely folks, most recently.
Yeah.
So.
Jacquie, how did you discover it?
I discovered it because you kept telling me that you wanted to see it, but you and I are oddly stubborn in different ways. When something is extremely popular, I don't always want to see it. I'm not really interested in it. I've had too many times where, somebody has said, oh my God, this movie, Fatal Instinct, I think it was, the one with Glenn Close and Michael Douglas. It was a massive hit, and I waited to see it, and I hated it. And that had happened with too many things. So when Eddie kept saying, let's go see Hamilton, I was like, yeah, everybody likes it. It's probably just the mob mentality. It's not really going to be that good. I'm not excited. Really, I read the book, and that somehow became a rap musical. I don't get it. And then, of course, I saw it, and I was like, oh, okay, this is very, very good. I really enjoy it. And, how quickly can we get to see it on Broadway?
I would say if we haven't introduced who everybody is yet, Jackie is my wife, Caryn is my law partner, and Dave is her husband. And I think Caryn would be totally responsible for the reason I like Hamilton, because of her persistence in having me give it a try. And my experience happened with the soundtrack, where I fell in love with it after listening to the soundtrack many, many times, where I even had discussions with Caryn that before we saw Hamilton live, I had scenes played out in my head of what I thought different scenes would look like, and I was totally wrong about what those scenes looked like, but I had played the play out in my head a couple times or a couple hundred times as I was trying to memorize the lyrics. So
Which, by the way, just to interrupt you for a moment, is the exact reason that I refused to listen to the soundtrack until we had seen the play, because I wanted to see it all in context. And that was another thing that really frustrated you too. It's a good thing I ended up liking Hamilton. Let's just put it that way.
Can I get real a second? Just a millisecond? Later. Sorry. So as I was saying, Caryn sucked me into this world, and I kind of have an obsessive personality. So once I find something I like, I typically do the deep dive, and eventually Jackie came along with us and read the book, the Ron Chernow book, and really got into a lot of the details beyond the play. And like when I learned that Hamilton threw away his shot and what that meant in a literary way, that moment, I was just, my mind was blown, and you could just it was fun because, I came to the party way too late, but glad I did. Thank you, Caryn, for bringing me into the world of Hamilton.
And to say that he got slightly obsessed would be an understatement, just so we're clear. So
he does, yeah. We might have to explain that to other people, but we understand it. When he likes something, it's 24/7, 365 days a year. And it doesn't mean, by the way, that one obsession is replaced with another. It just means they're all on top of each other.
It became very pervasive in the office very quickly. So, and then Eddie sort of made it his mantra to somehow weave Hamilton lyrics into his arguments in court, which was a completely different level that I, as a practitioner, could never even imagine. But he did it.
That's something I've been doing all my life. I was weaving
the Pirates of the Caribbean poster. There was a period of time where he was weaving Pirates of the Caribbean quotes into all of his. Oh. This is something that's been, he's done this more than once.
I'm sorry I missed that era.
Well, I also think Hamilton has a lot of quotable, lyrics that can be applied to a lot of things in daily life, even.
That's right.
So it's very. I think it's appropriate.
Yeah.
As long as you understand and have seen the show, I guess.
People got freaked out when I started ending my correspondence with your obedient servant as my sign-off line, and
it was a little much.
Yeah, so that didn't last long. But
you probably heard my eyes rolling because that one was a little too much.
Well, if you don't know Hamilton, you don't understand that it's. It means something different than what it sounds.
Here's something else surprising. Sometimes people see Hamilton, they enjoy it, but it doesn't become a pervasive part of their lives. So it might not, they might have seen Hamilton, but they might not, necessarily remember that Your Obedient Servant was something in the play.
I can't imagine that being true. I just can't imagine.
What was everyone's favorite part of the show? The part you look forward to every time y'all see it, and the part, honey, that you're looking forward to seeing the most when we do get to see it on Broadway?
Well, I kind of looked at this question in two different ways. I guess there's probably one of my favorite moments as far as one particular song and one particular section, but then there's also my favorite part of Hamilton as like the overarching, I'd say, what motif of the show. Like there's several of them, but there's at least one that really speaks to me. So I could go with either.
Give it. Definitely give it.
Well, I think the motif part, it's a little longer of an explanation, but
that's okay.
But basically, it's the wait for it motif, and it kind of goes with both Hamilton and Burr's character arcs throughout the entire show. So Hamilton, you get introduced very early, and he's a guy who acts, and he pursues what he wants, and he does everything he needs to do to get where he wants to be in life. And then later on, you get introduced to Burr, and his kind of like theory or theme of life is to wait and see what happens and then decide what to do. So you kind of first see this in the story of Tonight at the end of the song, where Burr is talking about this woman on the side, Theodosia, who's like down in South Carolina, and Hamilton's like, why are you waiting for this? You know, if you like her, go pursue her. And then it moves on to his song, Wait For It, which kind of describes Burr in a nutshell, of course. And then later on in the second act, or I guess it's actually the last song in the first act, Nonstop, Hamilton and Burr are kind of comparing their careers and lives and how life is going for them. And Hamilton's like shooting up like a rocket ship, and Burr is kind of just staying where he is. And, it furthers that part where, Hamilton does what he needs to do to get ahead, and then Burr kind of just waits, and he won't even, back the U.S. Constitution at that point. So I guess where these things start to, cross and change is the song, The Room Where It Happens.
Yeah.
Where, Hamilton's with Jefferson and Madison, they decide about the Capitol and things like that, and the financial system. But Burr is narrating this song, but he's kind of in the background, and he's looking in this room, and at the end of the song, he's like, I want to be in the room where it happens. So He's realizing that all this time of waiting is kind of hurting him, and Hamilton's almost making fun of him, like, I'm in the room where it happens. But then, but kind of.
And it's interesting, if I can interrupt for a second, because Burr and Hamilton actually had not dissimilar upbringings, because they both had a lot of loss early in life. But then the major difference in their growing up is that Burr always had money and Hamilton very much did not. So I kind of wonder how much of Burr's attitude is because he had that more elevated position, so to speak, and things did tend to drop in his lap.
Yes, I think that's a very good point, because when you have something to lose, you're more likely to try to hold on to it and not lose it. When you have maybe nothing,
or take a risk.
Right.
Yeah, take a risk.
Right.
But going on to my next point about that is with the song Hurricane, where Hamilton's trying to decide what to do about his situation with his infidelity. And if you listen closely at the end of the song, you do hear Burr in the chorus in the song saying, wait for it, in the end of that song. And what I think that is Burr's trying to tell Hamilton in that moment, wait for it. Don't write this down and cause so much distress and destroy your life, so to speak. So it's kind of the inverse, where Hamilton is maybe listened to that, advice from Burr, wait for it, but he ends up not deciding to take it. So
his life kind of implodes.
Yeah. So, and then obviously at the very end of the show, they kind of change sides, so to speak, because, well, Burr's the one who acts and shoots, and then Hamilton's the one who throws away a shot, and fortunately, we all know what happens. So the character arcs and how they kind of cross, where Hamilton starts out as acting and then ends up more or less waiting, and then Burr waits at the beginning and he acts at the end. It's beautiful in the way it's been.
I mean, that's really a big part of the show, is that it's written so well, and especially coming out of this just massively wordy book that's, it's kind of academically written, so it's not really easy to slog through. And the fact that he got this musical out of it still, it amazes me.
And I want you to note that Jackie has the book tabbed by reference specifically for this conversation.
I'm so
Actually,
impressed.
not just that, but I did do a lot of highlighting and tabbing in this.
So Jackie, how close is the play to the book?
There were plenty of places where I could see kind of direct inspiration. I find him to be very close to history. There are certainly places where they diverge. Some of it because it had to, in order to make the play move along quickly. It was already, it's a 3-hour play, and it easily could have been 5 hours. He left out, obviously, a lot of political detail and a lot of political intrigue, but he was pretty close to reality. He was pretty close to the plot, so to speak. And there were a couple of different places where I really wondered about direct inspiration. Like on page 2, I had read the book way back when, and then I went back and reread it after we saw it. And I'm just, I open it up and I read the first page, and I get to the second page, and it's talking about how Eliza used to open up her house when she was really, really elderly, because she liked to talk about Hamilton, and she felt like Hamilton had been very much slandered after he passed away, or after he was murdered, and that she wanted to do her part in making him come to life for people. So she would open up the house and show all of his stuff. And this says this on page 2. The tour's highlight stood enshrined in the corner, a marble dust of her dead hero, carved by an Italian sculptor during Hamilton's heyday as the first Treasury Secretary. Portrayed in the classical style of a noble Roman senator, a toga draped over one shoulder, Hamilton exuded a brisk energy and massive intelligence in his wide brow, his face illuminated by the half-smile that often played about his features. This was how Eliza wished to recall him: ardent, hopeful, and eternally young. That bust I can never forget, one young visitor remembered, for the old lady always paused before it in her tour of the rooms and, leaning on her cane, gazed and gazed, as if she could never be satisfied. And I started weeping immediately. And of course, I'm listening to it with the soundtrack because, why wouldn't I? And I'm like, oh my God, this is for sure where he got satisfied from. So if that was the one question I could ask him, it would be that. I would want to know if that is, because it's so close.
My favorite part of Hamilton comes when I had heard the soundtrack and kind of fell in love with it. And, when you see it live and there are so many other elements, the choreography, the lights, the costumes, the music, the live music.
Just the stage itself is so fabulous.
So having my expectations be already excited and then exceeded to such a level, it's hard. I don't think there's another musical like this that is so artistic on each level, where it just comes to, this perfected piece of art. And I don't know if Lin-Manuel will ever be able to duplicate this kind of success again, just because it seems so unattainable. He set the bar so high.
Well, it's funny you brought up the set, Jackie, and the stage, because if I'm honest, my favorite part of the show is, I've had the privilege of seeing probably 1,000 musicals, and every time I see a show, I try to take in the full picture and not just the music and the actors. And I'm the kind of person that when I'm watching a show, I'm looking at what's going on with the chorus guy in the corner, because I want to see what he's doing and if he's into it as much as the two that your focus is on. But what I thought was brilliant about what Lin-Manuel did with this and how they staged the show is that it was so simple. You were talking about 2 wood platforms, one or 2 ladders that you could roll around, a couple of spotlights, a chandelier here or there, and a couple of set pieces. And it was so simple. Everything from how they lit it, how they did it, how they moved a couple pieces, and to their costumes. The whole majority of the first act, the entire choir is in like beige outfits that match like the wood tones of the stage. And it's just, it's so amazing because it really allowed the actors and the music and the lyrics to just stand for themselves. Because I mean, some of these shows you see, there was a movement, you know, like the last 10 years or so, big stage productions, big pieces and costumes and pyrotechnics and all. There's not a single like pyrotechnic in the show. I mean, there's not a single gun shop. There's not a single powder keg. There's not a single smoke machine. I mean, that's, to me, that's what's amazing, is the simplicity of it that allows you to just appreciate the art and the use of the costuming, and then, you know, how certain characters wore certain colors. And I don't know well enough to know if like the purple meant something or the green meant something, but you knew who you were looking at, and it had them stand out throughout the show that you knew he was going to be in purple. And I just think that that's what's so amazing every time I see the show, is how simple it is to move this stage on tour. Like, it's two pieces, you know?
We were talking about the costumes actually this morning. The chorus, as you say, is largely in these beige kind of onesies. And then, you know, for the wedding scene, a lot of the female dancers get skirts strapped to them, and then the skirts come off and they get some high boots and a jacket, and they turn into soldiers. And it was really incredible how complicated but simple it was. And we were looking at some of the other characters, like I think that Mr. Schuyler in Act 2 might be James Reynolds.
Oh.
And I'm not sure, but it could be very similar looking actors. And there were a couple of other lesser actors that I noticed the same thing. There were so many moving pieces to this, and he simplified it so much.
So let's move on and talk about our favorite characters. Caryn, who do you like the best?
So my favorite character is unquestionably Angelica. I think that she was an incredible person for her time. I think that she was far beyond her years, you know, and she was truly like an early part of a woman's movement. And I think that that's incredible. I mean, she was hobnobbing and hanging out with Jefferson and talking to him, and she makes those, you know, those kind of snarky comments in her song about, you know, I'm going to compel him to put women in the sequel when I see him, and talking to, you know, she was very educated for her time, and worlds beyond the average woman at that, in that time period. And I just think that she is sort of an incredible narrator who helps move the story along, interestingly, how Lynn wrote her, but just that I just have an incredible respect and appreciation for who she was at that time and what she did for history and all of the, you know, the gossip and things that go along with, did she have a relationship with Hamilton or not? And looking beyond that, I mean, what she did and what she spoke about and advocated even with her sister after his death is really remarkable. And I don't think she gets enough credit, no pun intended, but I don't think she gets enough credit where credit is due. And the fact that she, you know, we kind of like, oh, she was the sister, the scandalous sister, whatever, but like, she did and wrote and spoke and advocated and was the one that really brought the sisters into the forefront here and sort of connected them into that that movement of starting a nation. And for that, I think that I just adore her character, and I love how he wrote her.
There were both, I thought both Eliza and Angelica turned out to be really amazing women. And I was also really impressed with how he wrote pretty much all the women characters.
Yeah, I mean, when I also look back at it, it's hard to pick a favorite sometimes, but along with
especially because they're people.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, they are real people.
You're dealing with lives here.
They existed, and they were, but I actually, what you just mentioned, Jackie, about the ability for Lynn to I guess identify in the women's characters so well. And I guess when I look at Angelica at the end of Satisfied, and her ability to have the insight into not only her own future in life and Eliza's future in life with Hamilton, and just making that conscious decision to just let them have that, you know, glorious relationship, and realize that she'll never be satisfied, like she says, but right. Just to know that. And I just love all the lines at the end of, like, you know, the three things I realized.
Mm-hmm.
during that song. So I always go back to Angelica as my favorite as well. Sorry to copy you.
That's why we're married.
I identify with two characters in the musical for different reasons. Alexander Hamilton, just because he started off and had so many obstacles to overcome, and created something against odds. But then I also liked George Washington, specifically his leadership style. And I kind of relate to that, because what I do, I consider, going into battle, and I have, different tools and how I use those tools. And Washington doesn't really care about how, things are perceived. He just wants to get the job done. And, history will decide later. So, I really liked Washington, and mainly just because I relate to his leadership style. But he also had some really good lines, throughout.
Plus, Jefferson, it doesn't hurt that it was brought to stage by Christopher Jackson and his amazing voice. So that definitely helps.
I mean, Jefferson and Lafayette are cool on different levels. And David Diggs.
David Diggs.
David Diggs. He does an amazing job. And if you have a chance to see the little Ham for Hams when they debate in the actual White House, it's kind of, or if they take Jefferson does Hamilton and Hamilton does Jefferson, that's a fun one too.
My favorite character is Jefferson, mainly because he is so different from the Jefferson that I knew growing up. Because over the 50 or so years of my education, the way that the Founding Fathers has been taught has changed, and the way that they're written about has changed. To have him come out, and of course I know that Jefferson didn't actually dance through the White House and stuff, but just to have him come out and be kind of this arrogant jerk. He comes back at the end of the war after everybody's put their lives on the line, and he basically at the beginning of the Revolutionary War ran out of his state. He was governor, and he ran into the woods because he was being attacked, and he got scared, and then they sent him to France. So he comes back and he's like, did I miss something? Because it seems like maybe some stuff went on, but I wasn't involved, so how important could it really be? And then he just seems to hate Hamilton right on sight, and their scenes together, in a way, Lin-Manuel whitewashes Hamilton because he really was kind of an arrogant prick, but he does make him a lot more likable. Some of these scenes with Jefferson, though, where they're rubbing each other the wrong way, you get the sense more of what Hamilton might have been in real life, too. I think the two characters brought out the best in each other in a really weird way.
I didn't have an appreciation for their relationship, I think, until I saw this show. I remember learning about Hamilton in school and Jefferson and going to Monticello growing up and touring his house. And I didn't realize how much, anger, animosity, frustration, competition the two of them had. I didn't have a comprehension for the negotiations that they had done to, get the White House where it is and to get what Hamilton did. And I mean, I was just, it really just brought out a different light. I mean, you really realize what a jerk maybe Jefferson was, or what a wimp he was at the same time. I mean, he just looked, you always viewed him as this incredible president, this grandiose home and all this, and he was kind of a wimp. So I think it's amazing.
And of course, one of the things that they never really taught us in school was Thomas Jefferson and Sally Hemings and what their, relationship really was. And, that he had children with her that he didn't even free. Mm-hmm. He allowed them to run away so they were able to go off and start lives. And they were white passing. But I mean, let that sink in. Our founding father owned his children and never freed them.
So true. They gloss over that point on the tour at Monticello, just so we're clear. There's just very little mention about Sally and all of his fun, you know. So, but that's valid. Be an interesting point, because you have this whole thing with the Reynolds pamphlet and that, and his joking with Lynn, and then this guy was being a dog on the side with Sally, you know. So
But it doesn't seem like anyone in the show is spared. I mean, nobody's made out to be this perfect person, but that's the way life is. Nobody's perfect.
right.
So I think it's more accurate in depicting people that way.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
was Sally the one that Jefferson calls out to in What I Missed to bring him like
Yeah, the letter.
Yeah, she gets the one little call out there.
just like
So that's a mention.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's nice that history mentioned her in that way.
So there's so many good songs in Hamilton. Is it possible to pick one as your favorite?
I think it's pretty hard, to be honest with you, for a variety of reasons. There are different songs. I didn't like a lot of the second act for a very long time, and Burn has now become one of my more favorite songs. I've really developed an appreciation for it. Part of it is the soundtrack, because Philippa Sue has like such a perfect voice. But really what I missed was my first favorite song, and probably the one that I go to the most, in part because of its energy, but it is really hard to pick just one.
I'm really sort of a sap at heart, and so the songs that always get me in every show is the one that makes me cry. So the first time that we saw the show, it's interesting because we've had the ability to see it now 4 times, and we've seen 4 different guys play Hamilton and 4 different women play Philippa Sue's character of Eliza, and everybody's own interpretation. But what always got me is the last song, you know, Who Lives, Who Dies, Who Tells Our Story, and how she just takes that final breath at the end and raises her hand to the sky. And I've seen a different interpretation of that each one of the 4 times we've seen it. But that song, I think, is just an incredible bookend and end to the start of it with Alexander Hamilton. And I love the way that Lynn introduces characters to us in the first song, and then we reaffirm their influences in Hamilton's life in the final song. And I think they're incredible bookends. And I've heard and read a lot of people saying, oh, that last song was so anticlimactic and not a big showstopper. And I think that it was a showstopper uniquely because of how he ended on such a quiet note with a breath and a hand in the air of life. But I love how in the first song we get to meet who fought with him, who loved him, who died for him, who shot him. You know, right away you know who you're dealing with. And Lynn has that way of doing that in a lot of, he does that in The Heights as well, and I think it's amazing. But then the final song, you now are seeing, you know, Washington saying, you know, about Eliza and Hamilton, about how she told my story and how she did this. And I think that it's an interesting parallel, but just so uniquely, because the first song starts off with such a bang and you end on such a quiet note. So I love Who Lives, Who Dies, Who Tells Our Story. I love The World Was Wide Enough, my other favorite song. Not because of the duel, not because of the drama, not because of all of what takes place in like that 4 minutes of the song, but Burr and how he just breaks my heart every single time, no matter who we've seen. And some of them have been more dramatic than others, but how he just, you know, he looks and he says, you know, something like, you know, it takes and it takes, and just how he sings that, and it's so quiet on stage. I mean, it just breaks my heart every time, because for a few minutes you really just, your heart goes out to Burr. And you know, the story about Hamilton putting on his glasses and him shooting, and just it just comes down to like the utter despair that he is expressing now that he basically killed his friend and foe. And we all sort of go through those feelings in our life where we lose someone, maybe not as dramatically as Burr did watching Hamilton die, but just it just breaks my heart listening to that song. And I think that it's so beautifully done. And in that song with how he uses the floor, Lynn, and how they move the characters on that set piece, and just it's so interestingly articulate, and just it's beautiful, and it's sort of just the most melodramatic, just I don't know, heart-wrenching scene for me when he's alone on that stage in the dark and singing to you in the audience, and you're like, I mean, that gets me. No matter how many times I've seen it, that gets me, and I feel bad for him for a minute, and then I hate him again. But it's good. I mean, that just shows like the complexity of that character and the beauty of the music that Lynn wrote. I mean, anyway.
Well, there are probably two that stand out to me the most and that give me the most emotional when I'm watching it or listening to it. The first being at the end of Satisfied, which I kind of brought up before, which was she just kind of realizes that she could have had maybe the perfect life with Hamilton if she had decided to pursue him and go with that, and then just gives it up out of here's my my sister will be happy. And also when she says at least I keep his eyes in my life, like she realized she puts it aside that she won't have exactly what she wants, but she realizes the next best thing might be to just at least have him in her life for forever, because they're family now.
I'm going to interrupt here just to be the spoil sport who points out that she had already been married for 3 years at this point. So there was never, this is all Lynn created drama. She never had the opportunity. She was never going to marry Hamilton. Sorry, I'm that person.
That speaks to how well he wrote and developed these characters, because it makes
very much so. I agree with that. Very much so.
It makes me tear up when I hear it. And then the second thing is at the end of It's Quiet Uptown, when the chorus comes in and they say like forgiveness. Yeah. And it's like when someone can be hurt that badly by someone and still forgive them is, I don't know, that just makes me emotional thinking about it right now. So
when she reaches out and takes his hand at the end, yeah.
That handhold has the same effect on me as like the hand at the end with the final breath. I mean, it's just like one thing and you're just done.
Very much.
I like it when they debate and argue. I love the cabinet battles. I love probably an unpopular song, Farmer Refuted, because it's the ultimate smackdown. And it's also just the cadence of the song and the complexities of, the two verses going at the same time and weaving in and out where the lyrics match up. And I just enjoy a good verbal smackdown, and Alexander Hamilton delivers one very appropriately.
He may have debated the cabinet battle throughout The Office a couple of times as well, so clearly it stuck with Eddie.
Okay, so let's get to something that's perhaps a little less popular, since we all really actually love the play a lot. What is your least favorite part of the play? And I'm going to start because mine is so petty that probably you're not even going to know what I'm talking about. When Angelica is singing in the beginning and she says, I just read Common Sense by Thomas Paine. After she goes through that line, a dancer comes on stage with a book, and he takes center stage and he dances with the book. He puts the book under his arm, he puts the book under his leg, he puts the book behind his head, he puts the book up here like Trump did, he puts it down there, he puts it over here, and he dances with this stupid book for about 30 or 40. See, I get so upset. He dances with this stupid book for like 30 or 45 seconds. And it just annoys the bejesus out of me. And that's the thing I dislike the most about Hamilton.
I mean, I can't say that I have a part that my least favorite part, but I can say there are things that like I'd want to change. And I wish that there was more just like discussion of the Burr relationship with the British soldier's wife. Like, I think that I'm like, so like, I would have liked to see more about that scandal. And it would have been nice to know or see or realize that Hamilton had like a slew of kids, like he had his own football team, and we only know one of them. And there's like this slight mention of it when he's singing at the piano, Philip singing with Eliza, and he says, I got a little, what do you say? I want a sister, but now I want
a sister, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the kid had like 3 or 4 at the time anyway, but there's like no discussion of that. So I'm like, it would have been nice to hear. I know that would have been a whole other cast development thing, but like, I wish we realized that Hamilton really was a family man, and that there was more than just Philip. And like, we felt such sorrow when Philip died, but we didn't realize that Hamilton, like, not only did he bear a whole slew of other kids, but he named his final kid Philip and like made up for the loss of the first one. So it was kind of like crazy. And the fact that Burr, we hear like he has the romance with Theodosia, and then he names his kid Theodosia, and like the scandal of that. I would have liked to have seen those family dynamics, but I think I really would like to see the most is what happened to Burr after the shot. We never go there. We never see what happens, and he had a whole like long crazy life after that duel in Weehawken, and it would have been nice to see a little bit more of him, although I don't know if I could have sat through 3 acts, but nonetheless.
That could be the follow-up. Aaron Burr, what happened next?
Right. I mean, just I would have liked to know. I mean, he was quite a scoundrel. I mean, like, you read about the guy. I remember learning about him. But Burr was tried for treason and ran away out of the nation for a while, and like all of that. And it would have been nice to see. And then the fact that I've said every single time I've seen the show, and he will mark my word, every single time I've seen the show, every time, and I said it to you guys before we saw it, just when you think Act 1's gonna end, don't worry, there's 3 more songs after that, so you gotta wait for your bathroom break a little longer. So I always thought, since the moment I saw the show, and even when I listened to it, it should have ended with Yorktown. Act 1 should have ended with Yorktown, and I think that we should have seen the birth of the nation start after that. And Dave has debated that with me a million times, but we go for like 3 more songs all the way to Nonstop, and they're already in the birth of the new nation. And I'm like, Act 1 should have been the war. Act 2 should have been the new nation. So that's just my thing I wish I could change.
Act 2 is so heavy that it kind of would have been nice if they had ended Act 1 with Yorktown and started it, from there. Because, I get it's not something I hate about the play, but Act 2 is just so heavy. It really is. That it would have been, something like Nonstop might have been a kind of welcome, upbeat energy.
And Act 1 is a whole lot longer than Act 2.
Yeah. That's what I always tell people when they go with us. I'm like, don't drink too much before the show. It's not a good thing. So.
Yeah, I mean, I sometimes agree with her because the way Yorktown ends, it's so epic, and it just seems like the perfect end of Act 1. But then I'm like, where would you put, Dear Theodosia? That song kind of has to be somewhere in the middle, I think. And I think it's perfectly placed there. But I could see it also being the beginning of Act 2. Mm-hmm. But usually when you come in from a break and like, the potty break and the intermission, we call it, you don't want a song that's kind of quiet because people are kind of settling in their seats. So I don't know. I would say that probably it's a good choice the way he did it, in my opinion.
I had listened to the soundtrack so many times, and I didn't realize that there were parts of the play that were not in the soundtrack. And when Hamilton gets the letter from John Lauren's father that he had passed away, and Eliza reads it to him, that caught me off guard and kind of struck an emotional chord, not a happy chord, an uncomfortable, sad chord, which, is what art is supposed to invoke. But me being one that likes to be in total control of a situation, that did catch me off guard and kind of hit that string for me. So not a horrible part, but just unexpected part.
Is there anything else that happened in real life that you would have liked to have seen included in the play? And we kind of talked about it with Burr and the children, because not only did Hamilton and Eliza have a bunch of children, so did the Schuylers. And of course, Angelica sings, I'm the oldest, I've got to get married, my father has no sons. And that's not at all true. They had 15 kids total, although they had triplets. He didn't make it past, So there were roughly 15 kids that were born to the Schuylers. And at the point in time that she would have been singing that song, she had brothers that had made it past childhood. So there were small details like that he took liberties with, but like you said, he had to. How are you going to, parade these children through? You gotta cut some stuff off somewhere. But then there were other things, like there's a really big there is a very big historical rumor that John Lawrence and Alexander Hamilton were lovers. And I kind of would have liked to have seen that addressed a little bit, because, and he does get this across to a pretty good extent, I think. Hamilton and John Lawrence were close friends of a nature that Hamilton never had another friend like that. When Lawrence passed away, he never really had another very, very, very close friendship like that. So were they lovers? Were they just incredibly close friends? Maybe that might have been interesting to have explored a little more.
And to interrupt you for a second, what I thought was interesting is that the Anthony Ramos who played Lawrence on Broadway was then, that character's reincarnated in the second act as Philip, his son. So who knows? Maybe you're on to something.
Who also gets killed.
Yeah, I mean, who also dies? So poor Anthony Ramos, that poor guy just got shot twice. But anyway, I think that was interesting, and I think that was, I don't know, getting in the mind of Lin-Manuel, but maybe it was what he was doing, is making us think that, because those letters between the two of them in real life are some scandalous writings between those boys. So who knows?
Yeah, because one of the sons, when he was trying to put together a biography of Hamilton, actually cut pieces out of the letters so that they would never be found again. So you kind of got to wonder what they said.
When you have that much material, I think they did an amazing job synthesizing the story and being able to tell as much as they did. And we know Alexander Hamilton didn't meet all these people on the same night in a bar, and yet certain parts are fictionalized in a way to move the story along, because there would be no other way to do it in an entertaining way. So I know we've had a big discussion about all the historical inaccuracies, but I'm okay with it. And it most of it is pretty true to the real story. And where they had to take these liberties, I think it totally made sense in forwarding the storytelling of the play.
Why don't you tell us about that story, Eddie?
Yes,
So,
Eddie.
We challenged him to do the entire when the pandemic started. He was playing around with Andrew Lloyd Webber, going back and forth, and he did one of the songs from my other favorite musical, Jesus Christ Superstar. I think it was Everything's All Right. So I reached out and actually mailed him a letter challenging him to do the entire musical, Jesus Christ Superstar, on this podcast today. And he didn't do it, but he did send this very nice handwritten note that Caryn has analyzed and has determined that really is his signature on the bottom, where Lynn actually writes and says, sorry, I can't take you up on your challenge. Hope this note does, because we know he's a busy boy and playing around with our funny little podcast. Who has time for that, right?
Well, my first question would be, Lynn, what is your favorite Broadway musical that isn't one you've written or been a part of? And my second question is, would you mind doing a one-man show at some point?
And I think my questions for him would be, now that he's had the opportunity to be a part of this, and star in it on stage, and then sit back and watch someone else assume his role, and then watch 20,000 other people assume his role in a million different tours across the world. Now that you've seen this a million times, what would you do about changing? Would there be anything that you would change? Looking back at this now, any song, any movement, a costume, a lighting, anything, what would you change now that you have the chance to be in it and watch it? And my other kind of geeky question for him would be how he does this, like how his brain works. Does he see a scene in his head and then write the melody and then write the lyrics, or does he you read in the different articles that, he wrote some of the songs on a honeymoon, or he wrote this one on a subway on the way to a party. And, did you hear the lyrics first, or did you hear the melody first? And how do you put it all together? And did you have a view of how the scene was going to be, and then what worked around what is what I'd love to hear him talk about more.
So, Caryn, what do you think the geekiest thing has happened since you've introduced Hamilton into our work world?
Well, besides the fact that it's an ongoing daily debate in my doorway with song lyrics, and Eddie wanting me to join in with the next set of lyrics and try to figure out what he's talking about, and annoying everyone else around us. But besides that, we had a hearing in court a few months ago, right after we had seen Hamilton, and I was doing the closing argument for the hearing. I'd done the opening, and then I was doing the closing, and Eddie did everything, all the heavy lifting in the middle. And I was about to get up and make our closing argument, and Eddie throws a piece of paper across the table to me in court, and I'm thinking he has like a note he wants me to add into closing. And it was a note, but it wasn't the note that you would expect to get in court. But he gave me a handwritten thing that said, "Oh my God, tear this guy apart." So took a picture of it, because it was, definitely posted that on social media, and we had many comments that everybody I guess was jealous of our ongoing Hamilton debates in the office and how we could weave this into the courtroom. But that I tried not to laugh, and then I had to go up and make a serious argument, although it was a slam dunk of a hearing anyway. But like that kind of caught me off guard, and I could not stop laughing in my head with that one.
Well, I think, as Dave has pointed out, Hamilton does translate much better to the practice of law than it might to, teaching yoga.
I practiced the law and practically perfected it.
That's perfect.
So you guys ready for some trivia?
Sure.
Yes, Hamilton trivia. Okay.
So let's do some Hamilton trivia. Are you ready for question number 1?
Yes.
Ready.
Go for it.
All right. Raise your hand if you think you know the answer. What was Samuel Seabury's middle name? I saw Jackie's hand go up first. Jackie?
He has no middle name.
You are correct. Samuel Seabury does not have a middle name. Caryn, I'm Dave. I'm a little surprised you didn't know that. Question number... Jackie is in the lead by 1. Next question. What philosopher does Alexander Hamilton compare himself in the song Nonstop? What philosopher? I see Dave's hand up. Dave.
It's Socrates.
Bing, bing, bing. It is Socrates. So Dave goes in
Yay, Dave.
a tie position. True or false? George Washington was the 2nd U.S. president. Caryn had her hand up first.
False.
False is, that was an easy one, but we brought you to a tie game. Good job, Caryn. How many times are the words "It's Quiet Uptown" sung during the song by the same title? 4, 10, 7, or 12?
4.
Did you take that trivia question?
No, but I love the song.
We'll give you that one and assume you didn't cheat. Next question. Now I'm watching you. I have my eyes on you.
That would be good.
How many times does Aaron Burr sing "The Room Where It Happened" in the song "The Room Where It Happened"? 25, 12, 23, or 18? Jackie?
No, I don't want to lose a point.
But you raised your hand, so you're on the hook.
No, I didn't. I took it down. I didn't see it. I didn't see it at all.
Dave's going to give it a shot.
I'll take 23.
Wrong. You lose a point, Dave.
Extra.
That takes you down to 0. And it was 18. No one gets a second shot. George Washington is known for having false teeth. What material is his false teeth made of? Caryn?
Wood.
That is incorrect. You lose a point. It is commonly thought of as wood, but it's actually ivory and real human teeth.
Well, he was
I knew it wasn't wood, that we had been taught the wrong thing. I just couldn't remember what the material was.
It is not wood. Can you imagine?
I thought that was another easy one, like Washington being the first president, damn it.
Some of
And
these.
yet Washington died of some random sore throat. I mean, with ivory and other people's teeth in his mouth. How could that happen?
So Jackie and Caryn are tied at 1. Dave lost a point and has. What year was the U.S. Constitution ratified?
Oh gosh.
1794, 1788, 1789, or 1787? Dave has his hand up.
1787.
Bing, 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 bing. Dave's back in the game. We're tied across the board, ladies and gentlemen.
Okay.
Hey, we're going to crank this punk rock party up a notch and ask some hard questions. Are you ready? Which college, this is tough, did Philippa Sue attend? Or do we have any Philippa Sue fans?
They've had their hands raised for about 5 minutes now.
I think Caryn had it first, maybe?
She
was
went
close.
to Juilliard. She's a Juilliard trained musician.
Correct. She did go to Juilliard. That's a good one. Caryn takes the lead with 2. All right. Back to the game of trivia, which is not a word that Aaron Burr uses to describe Alexander Hamilton at the start of Your Obedient Servant. Arrogant, whoreson, Scotsman, orphan.
I say it's arrogant.
You would be wrong. The line starts off, how does Hamilton, an arrogant, immigrant, orphan, bastard, whoreson? So it's Scotsman is the wrong answer. So
Oh, okay.
you're down to 1. We can
But
keep
he
going.
does say Scotsman in other songs.
That's
so
a tricky question.
it's very tricky.
This is a high-level trivia question. You guys did not want easy questions. Where was the first battle of the Revolutionary War? First battle. Is it Trenton, New Jersey, Monmouth County, New Jersey, Richmond, Virginia, or Lexington, Massachusetts? Dave?
I'd say Lexington.
Dave goes way in the lead with 3. Caryn has 1. Jackie has 0.
We're just gonna push him off camera.
Who does George Washington say is right in Cabinet Battle number 2? Raise your hand. Jackie.
Hamilton.
Ask him to draft a statement of neutrality. Jackie's on the board with 1. Caryn has 1. Dave has 3. Anybody's game. Hands on your laps. What rapper did Alexander Hamilton remind Lin-Miranda of? The options are the Notorious B.I.G., Snoop Dogg, Offset, or Tupac. Anyone want to give this one a Dave?
Go for it, Dave.
Well, I wanted to say Notorious B.I.G. because the 10 Dual Commandments were based on the 10 Crack Commandments song.
So you would be wrong. As noted in the New Yorker, Alexander Hamilton reminded Lin-Manuel Miranda of the rapper Tupac Shakur, who passed away in 1996. Mm-hmm. So, Dave, you're down to 2. Everybody else is at 1. Anyone's game. True or false? You need to see hands here. Hamilton tells Burr he would rather be indecisive than divisive. Caryn?
It was Hamilton telling Burr, right?
Yes.
That's false.
What did he say? Bonus point.
Oh my God, he'd rather be.
It's the other way around. He'd rather be divisive than indecisive.
I had to split him in my head. That's why I asked you who said it.
You don't get the bonus point, but that brings you up to 2. You're tied with Dave, and Jackie's 1 point behind. Oh, this is going to be tough. This is going to be for the real Hamilton fan. Who was the lighting designer for Hamilton? The lighting designer.
Caryn. You guys can take this one.
You're going to have to give us choices on this.
David Brooks, Christopher Hayes, Howell Blinkley, or Nevin Steinberg. You want to take a shot?
I'm going to throw it away.
Everybody passes.
I'm
Dave,
not losing my point.
Dave, are you willing to take a risk?
No.
Howell Blinkley was the lighting designer for Hamilton, and he got a Tony Award for it.
How bizarre that Blinkley.
Yeah.
For the light.
It's a good mnemonic, I guess.
Bastard.
True or false? Right now, 2-1 is the score. I'm going to need to see a hand. This may be an easy one. Alexander Hamilton helped adjudicate the first murder trial in American history. Caryn.
True.
Adjudicate?
Like try.
With his co-counsel or second chair, Burr. Yep.
Yes, as we end Act 1. So we have Caryn in the lead right now with 3, Dave 2, Jacquie 1, anyone's game. Next question. James Madison says that Hamilton took the country from bankruptcy to what? Let me see hands. Caryn beat Dave barely.
Prosperity.
You are correct. Caryn way in the lead. She may be walking away with this.
Looks like Dave's buying dinner.
Which role did Anthony Ramos not play in Hamilton? Philippe, John Laurens, James Madison? Dave.
James Madison.
You are correct. So Dave has 3, Caryn has 4, Jacquie has 1.
Bonus point. Who is he engaged to?
I think he's married now to.
They're not married. It's the original Peggy Schuyler.
What's her name?
Jasmine Cephas Jones.
Jasmine.
Yep.
This is going to be a hard one. How long is the song nonstop? 4 minutes and 50 seconds, 7 minutes and 32 seconds, 6 minutes and 25 seconds, 5 minutes and 58 seconds. Dave?
5:58.
Is incorrect, and that brings you down to 2. You took a risk there at 6:25.
Wow.
So Dave has 2, Caryn has 4, Jacquie has 1. It seems like a fight for second place. On what day is Constitution Day celebrated?
We have like months, like ballpark.
September 17th, January 23rd, November 6th, or July 4th? No Googling it.
We're not putting up our hands.
We were showing we didn't have phones.
You can pass if you want.
I feel like I'm almost certain it's January.
June 14th. Wait, give me those dates again. What are we at? What'd you ask?
On what day is Constitution Day celebrated?
Constitution Day.
We're going to pass because you're obviously using a mobile device to find the answer, and that's not really how that kind of violates the spirit of the game.
September 17th.
You lost a point. You lost a point for that, Jacquie. You're down to 0.
September 17th.
Just kidding.
I did what?
No, we're not counting that one.
You now have an X on your block, Jacquie. Sorry.
That's fine.
Let me see how many more questions. We got a couple more questions here. It's still anyone's game. Rapid fire. What is the surprise that Philippe has for his father before supper? Anyone? Caryn.
A wrap.
You have 5 points. Next question. Which Broadway show is Hamilton alum Ephram Sykes currently in? What other Broadway show is Ephram Sykes currently in?
Ooh.
Is it The Lion King, Mean Girls, Aladdin, or Ain't Too Proud, The Life and Times of the Temptations? Dave.
It's Ain't Too Proud to Beg, The Life of the Temptations.
We'll give you a point for that one. You're up to 3. Caryn's at 5. Jackie's at 1. Fill in the blank. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Number 10. Caryn has her hand up.
Pieces.
You are correct. Caryn is running away with this with 6. Next question. What kind of apprenticeship did Mulligan do? Jacquie.
He was a tailor.
You are correct.
He was a tailor's apprentice.
Tailor's apprentice. The set's chandeliers are inspired by the fixtures of which historic location? Is it the Grand Windham, the Hamilton Grange, the Trinity Church, or the Francis Tavern? Jacquie.
I'll go with Trinity Church. What do I have to lose?
A point, and you just did. It was the Francis Tavern. You're back down to 1. What book is inspired Hamilton, an American musical? Jacquie.
Could we have a visual aid, Jacquie, please?
Yeah. Alexander Hamilton by Ron Chernow.
You're back up to 2.
Also the author of, unsurprisingly, Washington.
Wow.
How long did it take Lin-Manuel Miranda to write the first 2 songs of the musical?
Oh, it was years.
Caryn.
took him 1 year to write the first one and 1 year to write the second one.
2 years would be correct. Caryn has 7 points. Dave has 3. Jackie has 2. How many Tony Awards did Hamilton win in 2016?
Ooh.
How many Tony Awards? Was it 8, 10, 11, or 12? Jackie,
I'm going to go with 12.
you're down to 1.
What was it?
It was 11. Very close, but no cigar.
Oh, come on.
I was counting them. I just didn't get enough time.
Easy
I was
one
trying
here.
to look at the book and see if there was one.
Someone's going to get this one quickly. Get your hands ready. How many of the Federalist Papers did Alexander Hamilton write?
Wrote
Dave.
Other.
51.
Dave had his hand up, and he has 4
He did.
points. Where is Alexander Hamilton buried? Caryn,
We'll answer it together.
you had that to
Trinity
be clear.
Church.
Yeah, I'll give you each a half a point.
And we geeked out and went and saw it.
So they got that one right. The Hamilton album is one of blank Broadway soundtracks to reach the top 10 in the past 50 years. How many other? Jackie?
I don't care. 5.
That takes you down to 0. It would be 3. So last question here. If Dave gets this, he ties Caryn, and we go into a tiebreaker round. But he's got to get it. Jackie could block him. Jackie, put down your phone. Jackie, put
I
down
want to see
your.
what the plaque looks like. Oh.
Which newspaper was founded by Alexander Hamilton?
Oh my God.
Dave, you can tie. You can tie here.
Oh,
Dave's got his hand up.
Something in New York.
it is.
I'm going to take a wild guess and say the New York Post.
You are correct, and you're tied with.
Yes, you were right.
Woo! Good job.
I knew what it was halfway through, but I wanted you to get the point.
So, Jackie, we're going to have to mute you on this one because this is just between Caryn and Dave. Are you?
Oh, okay, no problem.
Are you ready? This
Sure.
is
Already.
to determine who wins the Stephens Hare household for the evening. How many children did Alexander Hamilton have? Caryn,
8.
you are the trivia champion.
Woo! Yes.
Jackie, you can unmute and come back and join us now. So I'd like to thank our special guests, Jackie, Caryn, and Dave, for joining us on this very special Hamilton segment. And thank you so much for geeking out with us, and that was a lot of fun.
Thank you, guys. Thank you for joining us. It was fun.
And tune into Disney Plus July 3rd for the premiere of Hamilton the Musical.
Yay! Something to look forward to.
I know, right?
I know.
Thank God.
Thank God they did that.
Hey, this is Eddie and Jackie back, and we're going to take a little bit of a deeper dive into Hamilton and talk about things such as things that might have been a little fictional.
So we were going to talk about some of the moments in Hamilton the musical that are actually they're not hysterical moments, they're historical moments that are actually historical moments that mean a lot to our country. And no matter which side of the coin you're on, if you look at what's going on right now, these things are all still very valid and important. So it's kind of cool to go over our history from time to time and, talk about things that are important, and that turned into a rap battle in this musical. Let's start with the first, we'll kind of go a little bit in order here. Washington hiring Hamilton to be his secretary or assistant, however you would like to look at it.
Right hand man, I think, is the appropriate term.
I think that Hamilton much preferred to think of it as being a right-hand man than think of it as being Washington's secretary. This was important because throughout his life, Hamilton was recognized for his brains. At a very young age, he wrote for the newspaper back in the Caribbean, and that what he authored was so good as a teenager that it impressed the adults, and they went ahead and sent him over to America for education. And he'd always been recognized for being very, very smart, but Washington recognizing this and asking him to help him fight the revolution and kind of taking him under his wing and definitely mentoring Hamilton. It really started Hamilton on his rise to the top.
I think Alexander Hamilton was a pretty good pick for George Washington because he did have excellent organizational skills. He was very articulate. He handled most of his correspondence, but at times they didn't always have the same agenda. For example, when Hamilton was selected for the Constitutional Convention, he proposed something that probably didn't have Washington's approval.
We know that it did not have Washington's approval because Washington did not want to run the government the same way that England had. To simplify it dramatically, Alexander Hamilton proposed something along the lines of having a royal family in America. Whoever was chosen to serve as president would keep serving for a lifetime. So when Hamilton suggests to Washington, "Sir, you can stay in office as long as you want. You don't have to quit." And Washington says, "But I have to for us to grow." That is more or less true. Hamilton knew that, or Washington knew that if he stayed in office as president, the country wouldn't be able to grow. The country would stagnate under his leadership. But on the other hand, having Hamilton as Secretary of Treasury was brilliant on Washington's part, don't you think?
I do, but I think the play kind of glosses over this great controversy. Except for the song One Last Time, they don't really acknowledge Alexander Hamilton's controversial stance that he advanced, that politicians in the United States have this monarchy-like succession. It's kind of hinted at in One Last Time, but it's more of a fictionalized plea to stay on board than really getting into what was Alexander Hamilton's probably most controversial move, which was try to establish a governmental system that would be kind of reminiscent of what England had.
The play does gloss over a few things with Hamilton. And one of the things that I think it glosses over with regard to Washington and Hamilton's relationship is that Hamilton had a really bad temper. And Washington frequently tried to mentor him as to how to handle himself and what, to try to control his temper a little bit more. And the play definitely glosses over that sort of stuff, especially in regard to Washington and Hamilton's relationship. Going back to Washington and Hamilton's relationship, of course, one of the huge historical moments in Hamilton the musical is the Battle of Yorktown. And that is, given the fact that the several-day battle is condensed into a 8 or 10 minute song, he does a really good job talking about how once Hamilton hit the battlefield, he hit the battle with his troops, that he almost overtook the people who were, cutting the trees in front of them, clearing the way. So I thought that the way that they recounted the Battle of Yorktown was both pretty historically accurate and important.
Jackie, I think you see the friction of Alexander Hamilton wanting to have that experience, that battle experience, because from an immigrant, he perceived that as his only way to advance in society is to come back and have a victory. And Washington, who kind of understood the different tools he had available to him, understood how valuable Alexander Hamilton was to give him advice and to be an advisor. So he was very reluctant to put him on the battlefield until the Battle of Yorktown. And Alexander Hamilton kind of employed a strategy which was risky, and it was either going to be a success or a huge failure. And it ended up where the actual offensive was over in about 10 minutes. And because of his strategy to sneak up and surround the military encampment and not use any ammunition and just rely on bayonets, Alexander Hamilton was able to reach that fame without getting a scratch, and really in just a 10-minute battle. And I think it's kind of interesting how the details of that battle became known.
How's that?
Well, initially, Alexander Hamilton wrote about it, but he wrote about it in a very humble manner, glorifying the men below him and giving them the praise and adoration. And it wasn't until Lafayette wrote about Hamilton leading this charge, I think it was on the 10th rebound, 9th or 10th rebound, that was critical in making Cornwallis bend the knee, that it was really celebrated that Hamilton was a true war hero because of this battle.
And that's very much what he wanted. You're right. He thought, as an immigrant with no money and no titles, that this was the best way to gain both. And of course, we could take a really deep dive here and talk about how he actually turned down his military pension, sending his family into debt for years and years. But that's getting into a really, really deep dive that I'm not sure we have time for here. And speaking of battles, Hamilton and Jefferson, they're really, I mean, Lin-Manuel does a beautiful job encapsulating these battles in the cabinet rap battles that are a lot of fun. But there's really a lot of history jam-packed into those moments with Jefferson.
Every line in the cabinet battle has some type of historical meaning or some incredible dig at the other side. And it's just fascinating how they use, the fact that Thomas Jefferson wrote the Declaration of Independence as an insult to Jefferson as they're debating other issues. And, that kind of goes back to the Hamilton mixtape, where they have this song about these historical paintings where where everybody was reverent and respectful. And that really was probably just an illusion, and these meetings were probably pretty smacked down, very contentious expressions of ideas.
The issue on the table: Secretary Hamilton's plan to assume state debt and establish a national bank. Secretary Jefferson, you have the floor, sir.
Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. We fought for these ideals. We shouldn't settle for less. These are wise words. Enterprising men quote them. Don't act surprised, you guys, because I wrote them. But Hamilton forgets his plan would have the government assume state's debts. Right. Now, place your bets as to who that benefits, the very seat of government where Hamilton sits.
Not true.
Ooh, if the shoe fits, wear it. If New York's in debt, why should Virginia bear it? Our debts are paid. I'm afraid. Don't tax the South because we got it made in the shade. In Virginia, we plant seeds in the ground. We create. You just want to move our money around. This financial plan is an outrageous demand, and it's too many damn pages for any man to understand. Stand with me in the land of the free. Pray to God we never see Hamilton's candidacy. Look, when Britain taxed our tea, we got frisky. Imagine what's going to happen when you try to tax our whiskey.
Thank you, Secretary Jefferson. Secretary Hamilton.
Thomas,
your response.
Thomas, that was a real nice declaration. Welcome to the present. We're running a real nation. Would you like to join us or stay mellow doing whatever the hell it is you do in Monticello? If we assume the debts, the union gets a new line of credit, a financial diuretic. How do you not get it? If we're aggressive and competitive, the union gets a boost. You'd rather give her the sedative? A civics lesson from a slaver. Hey, neighbor, your debts are paid because you don't pay for labor. We plant seeds in the South. We create. Yeah, keep ranting. We know who's really doing the planting. And another thing, Mr. Age of Enlightenment, don't lecture me about the war. You didn't fight me. You think I'm frightened of you, man? We almost died in the trench while you were off getting high with the French. Thomas Jefferson, always hesitant with the president, reticent. There isn't a plan, there wasn't jettison. Madison, you Madison, Addison, take your medicine. Damn, you're in worse shape than the national debt, is it? Sitting there useless as two shits. Hey, turn around, bend over, I'll show you where my shoes are.
Excuse me. Madison, Jefferson, take a walk. Hamilton, take a walk. We'll reconvene after a brief recess. Hamilton, a word?
You don't have the votes.
You don't have the votes.
You're going to need congressional approval, and you don't have the votes.
Such a blunder. Sometimes it makes me wonder why I even bring the thunder.
Why he even brings the thunder.
I'm sorry, these Virginians are birds of a feather.
Oh, man, I'm from Virginia, so watch your mouth.
So we let Congress get held hostage by the South.
You need the votes.
No, we need bold strokes. We need this plan.
No, you need to convince more folks.
Well, James Madison won't talk to me. That's a non-starter.
Winning was easy, young man. Governing's harder.
They're being intransigent.
You have to find a compromise.
But they don't have a plan. They just hate money.
Convince them otherwise.
Then what happens if I don't get congressional approval?
I imagine they'll call for your removal.
Sir.
Figure it out, Alexander. That's an order from your commander.
Yes, sir.
Despite the fact that the Schuyler and Hamilton families owned slaves, Hamilton was actually an abolitionist and he did not believe in slavery. He was hypocritical because it was easier to have slaves and that was, it was accepted even in New York, but he was not afraid to continuously throw back at Jefferson that he was a slave owner. We don't know whether he ever got into the, and we know what you're doing with your slaves thing regarding Sally Hemings, but we do know that he definitely poked Jefferson about that here and there. It was hypocritical of him, but he still did it. And with regard to finances, Jefferson and Hamilton were just 180. Jefferson thought that Hamilton was a demon spawn, and Hamilton thought that Jefferson was just a financial idiot.
But at the end, Hamilton's financial plan proved to be the very backbone of our country's financial system. Another historical part I thought was interesting that the play highlights is really the first sex scandal in American politics.
Absolutely. Even though it takes place over kind of a longer period of time than it's shown in the play. I think in the play you get the idea that it's a little period of time between the meeting, which is very fictionalized, and when the Reynolds pamphlet comes out. But there is actually, in reality, a several-year gap there. So Hamilton knew this was brewing for years and years and years. So he had plenty of time to think about how he was going to defend himself. Of course, the funny thing, not funny, haha, but the funny thing is that, people thought they were coming after Hamilton for a financial, for cheating financially. And as it turned out, he had just cheated on his wife. He had financially done absolutely nothing wrong.
I think it's interesting that Hamilton did not think that that would be a politically damaging move to reveal that maybe that shows the beginnings of his lack of judgment. We know he was paranoid. We know he was going into a deep depression. And we know his later years were marked with just irremarkably bad judgment. So just the fact that he thought that he could write his way out of that and the consequences that would have with all of his personal relationships with Eliza, with Angelica, with his children.
At that point in time, he had written his way out of quite a few problems. So you can see where he might have thought that he would be able to write his way out of it but the fact that he did not even give Eliza a heads up is pretty startling. He didn't give anyone a heads up that this was coming out. He just went ahead and published it. And then the next thing you know, we have the first American sex scandal. He was not shy, and he delved into all of the details. And while Lin-Manuel has Eliza burning her side of the correspondence at this point in history, it could have happened that way, but we don't know. We know that at some point Eliza did remove herself from the narrative by her choice, but it's more of an impression that I got anyway, that it was because Hamilton was so brilliant that she wanted him to stand out on his own. But, you know, it's certainly nice dramatic license that she might have burned the letters in response to the Reynolds pamphlet. But can you imagine, you know, we always worry about, you know, when celebrities or whatever are having sex scandals or drug scandals or whatever, and they say stuff and it's on the internet and we think, oh my goodness, their children can see it. And in this case, the Reynolds pamphlet was literally handed to some of his children. I can't imagine how shocking that is, but I agree with you. His judgment was pretty skewed there.
And of course, I think everybody knows the great historical moment that whenever you think of Alexander Hamilton and Aaron Burr, at least before Hamilton the musical, was the duel.
Of course. I mean, Aaron Burr and Alexander Hamilton, really up until I read the book the first time, they were just intertwined as far as I was concerned in history. And I didn't know how much. I mean, I didn't know that for 30 years they had actually spent time, you know, as co-counsel with each other, and Burr had run against Hamilton's father-in-law, and all the different ways that their lives had been intertwined. But, you know, it was always Burr and Hamilton because of the duel. And while I thought that Lin-Manuel did a good job bringing a lot of things, I thought that Lin-Manuel did a good job making the duel fairly historically accurate. There were also quite a few things he took dramatic license with.
My mind was blown when I learned the meaning of throwing away your shot, and the fact that that means, you know, you're at a duel, you point up in the sky and you throw away your shot.
When I found out what that meant, it just really encapsulated the brilliance of Lin-Manuel Miranda for me, because he starts with the idea of not throwing away his shot very early on in the play, but he means his experiences. You know, he didn't mean it in the dual manner, in the verb manner, in the action manner.
Or did he? You know,
well,
how many the layers and layers of this storytelling.
That's exactly my point, is that he starts off in the beginning with not throwing away his shot. You think this has to do with his experiences. And then he gets to the duel with, actually, I think it's brought up the first time with the John Lawrence-Charles Lee duel, where he hands
I will not throw away my shot.
He hands Lawrence his dueling pistol and says, John, do not throw away your shot. And when you realize the different levels of meaning, it's just so brilliant the way that Miranda has just brought everything around and interwoven these themes, the way Dave was speaking, our special guest, just absolutely brilliant, especially because these are all based on historical events. He's not just making things up. Well, a little bit maybe. The duel was, you know, quite historically accurate, except for a couple of things that, while they might be small items, are also rather important, like that Aaron Burr was an expert marksman. Like
Yeah,
that
I
Aaron
think
Burr
he was.
was an expert marksman, and that he probably practiced for the duel.
And Hamilton, I think this isn't covered in the play, but it's historically accepted. Hamilton told people that he was not going to fire at Burr and he was going to throw away his shot.
The first shot, yes.
So and we know what kind of state of mind he was in, and could this have been Alexander Hamilton continuing that martyr-like thought and surrendering his life to so Burr kills him?
Eddie, I mean, I think suicide by Burr was very possible. There were three, I forget what they're called. I believe they're called psychobiographers, and they go back and they're trained in psychology, and they look at things and they look at historical events to try to figure out what a person's state of mind might have been. And these three people found that, Hamilton may have been in a suicidal state of mind. I personally think he might have been in a suicidal state of mind. He seemed to be doing some of the things that we now look at as wrapping up his life in contemplation of suicide.
Getting his affairs in order.
Giving friends very detailed medical advice for the future.
Visiting friends.
Visiting sick friends. There were quite a few things that he did. And he also, usually duels were scheduled very quickly. You and I get into a fight on a Sunday. By Wednesday or Thursday, we've usually resolved it via duel. This was actually scheduled. First of all, it took a period of time for the two of them to wind through and decide they were going to get to the point of a duel. And then they scheduled it for 2 weeks out. And that gave, Burr plenty of time to practice and Hamilton plenty of time to get his affairs in order. Part of the reason that they scheduled it so far out was that it was scheduled for July 11th. And I believe on July 6th, Hamilton had court dates. So he was definitely getting his affairs in order. And to me, it felt a little bit like suicide by Burr.
So now that we've talked about the historical moments of the play, we know that there's a lot of historical inaccuracies, or more, better said, parts that are fictionalized for the advancement of the story.
Absolutely. And they go from very, very big to very, very small. And some of the small ones are actually, more important than you might think. Some of them, it's simply dramatic license. For instance, we know 3 Schuyler sisters in the play: Angelica, Eliza, and Peggy. And Angelica and Eliza get personalities, and you can see the characters that are kind of built there. Peggy is kind of just holding space for the rest of the Schuyler siblings. There were, I believe, 15 children born into the Schuyler family. Of course, many of them did not survive childhood. There were triplets, for instance.
But Angelica had older brothers. So the whole part of her being the eldest and having no brothers to succeed her father, that's all not true.
Dramatic license, absolutely. And he admits it. I've seen him on Twitter saying, yes, I took dramatic license there. It fit the song better. So, Peggy's just kind of there holding space for everybody else. Eliza and Angelica are given personalities, and they are, definitely part of a fictionalized family. The other thing that was fictionalized from the Schuyler family And this upsets a lot of people because they really invest in this. Angelica was already married when she met Hamilton, had been for 3 or 4 years. And as a result, there was zero chance she was ever going to marry Hamilton.
I think you broke Dave Hare's heart when you mentioned that in our
I feel so bad.
in our geek roundtable there. Yeah, I don't think he appreciated that. But it still fits into the creative Hamilton scheme work so well that I allow him that creative freedom.
It definitely, as soon as I learned that, which was quite soon after we saw the play, that just changed the way that I looked at a lot of the songs, and it just became more of a Angelica and Hamilton yearning for one another more than that they could ever actually do anything about it. And in real life, of course, we know that Eliza was actually very proud of how close her sister and husband were. And she kind of reveled in that relationship. When you see them telling him to take a break in the second act of the play, and they're kind of both coming at him, come with us, I believe that would have been very representative of the type of relationship the three of them had. And then one that bothers me quite a bit, although it's probably not as important, throughout the play and probably in real life, Hamilton's mother was referred to as a whore. To me, a whore is someone who sells sex for money, someone who is a sex worker. Alexander Hamilton's mother was not a sex worker. Alexander Hamilton's mother was a divorcee who had 2 children out of wedlock. And while that was beyond frowned upon back in that time, and it, as far as they're concerned, earned her the title whore, I believe that misses the mark. And I'm actually very insulted by it on her behalf.
Noted. So instead of the constant references to him being the son of a whore, it should just be the son of an adulteress.
Absolutely. But to tell you how they think about it back in the day, there was some probate litigation that Alexander Hamilton was involved in because, as we know, everybody in his life died when he was very young. But in his mother's probate litigation, Hamilton was considered, and I'm quoting from the judgment, he and his brother were considered obscene children born after his mother's divorce. So he grew up thinking that he was an obscene child.
You already mentioned that Angelica was married to John Church before she even met Hamilton.
Absolutely. And then, of course, we know that also Lawrence and Lafayette were married before Hamilton was. So when they sing, if the tomcat can get married, there's hope for our ass after all. Lawrence actually had knocked up a teenage girl, I believe very early on in his friendship with Hamilton. So he got married because he had to get married. Lafayette's was more of a political marriage, if I remember correctly.
And the meeting where Hamilton was confronted about his affair with Maria Reynolds, that wasn't really accurately as portrayed in the play, was it?
It was not accurate. It was not accurately portrayed. I can see why he did it that way. I mean, anybody can if you read the book, because it's actually very complicated and complex. A, how James Reynolds blackmailed him, and then B, how he blackmailed him, and then B, how that blackmail became known. and the meeting was fictionalized. The meeting was actually attended by Monroe, Frederick Muhlenberg, and Abraham Venable. The meeting happened in 1792. Hamilton did not publish the Reynolds pamphlet until 1797. This actually created a lifelong hatred of Monroe for Eliza. She seemed to blame Monroe more for the Reynolds pamphlet than she did Hamilton, which is that kind of lovely denial that people can go into. But in our geeky roundtable, I read off an excerpt from the Chernow book that describes how she snubbed Monroe after he had been president. And all I can say is that was, quite a move for a woman who has historically been known as something of a doormat.
So Jackie, thank you for having this conversation with me and diving deep. And I think the reason we were doing this is because we had plans to see Hamilton on Broadway this week for your birthday. And unfortunately, due to COVID, that got canceled, but at least we have Hamilton coming to Disney Plus.
I absolutely appreciated that happened, because yes, the week that Hamilton comes out on Disney Plus, we had tickets to see Hamilton on Broadway for my birthday, as well as another play, Moulin Rouge. We are hoping to see them in the fall or the winter, or even next year if needed, but that was a part of wanting to appreciate Hamilton, was that we really do appreciate that Disney Plus and Lin-Manuel Miranda and all of his co-creators gave us Hamilton this summer.
So since we were supposed to be in Broadway watching Hamilton, I had a friend of mine send you a special message, James Monroe Iglehart, and if you take a look at your phone, you'll see a special message from Jefferson to you.
Hello, Jackie, and a happy birthday from me, James Monroe, at Jefferson here on Broadway in Hamilton, and your beautiful and wonderful husband, Eddie. He's bringing you to the show for your birthday. So I just want to say your husband is actually really, really cool. He's a great birthday present just for you. And me here, I just want to say happy birthday, girl. See you soon in Broadway in Hamilton, and your beautiful and wonderful husband, Eddie. He's bringing you to the show for your birthday. So I just want to say your husband is actually really, really cool. He's a great birthday present just for you. And me here, I just want to say happy birthday, girl. See you soon in Broadway.
Oh, that was sweet, baby. Thank you.
So even though we are not going to see Hamilton on Broadway next week, I promise you, as soon as it opens, I will take you there. And James has offered to say hi to us, and it will be a great experience.
I can't wait. I know you wanted to stalk the back door anyway, so I'm excited about this trip whenever it may happen. I love New York, I love Broadway, and I absolutely cannot wait to see Hamilton on Broadway.
And Jackie, I cannot wait to reschedule our trip and make it up to you. Thank you for that really cool, in-depth discussion. No special edition Hamilton podcast would be complete unless we had Lin-Manuel Miranda. But we asked him to join us, and in fact, we asked him to perform the entire musical of Jesus Christ Superstar as a challenge. He didn't take me up on it, but he did write me this very nice note. So that's going to bring this week's special edition Hamilton podcast to an end. Why are you so upset? I'm not. It's all right you want to fight. You've got a hunger. I was just like you when I was younger, head full of fantasies of dying like a martyr. Dying is easy, young man. Living is harder. Join me next week for episode 10, which will be our season finale, where we will have a spectacular guest, Palm Beach Post columnist and author, Leslie Gray Streeter. I'd like to thank my special guest, James Monroe Iglehart, Michelle Suskauer, my lovely wife Jackie, Caryn A. Stephens, and her husband David Hare. Thank you all for joining me and helping me create this Hamilton edition of Eddie's podcast. Thank you for tuning in this week. Remember to live and try to do something that matters.
Bye, everybody. Take good care of yourselves and each other.
Yo, Eddie, got a story to tell. Positivity touch you, bet you feeling like Braille. There's something to that trauma, you've been through it. Something like closure, the promise to get through it. Sometimes it's nice to lean on somebody's shoulder, especially when that shoulder been there a couple times over. That intimacy navigates in empathy. Eddie's podcast, a journey, relax and take a seat. La da da do. Do something that matters. La da da do. Do something that matters. Welcome to the Eddie Podcast. Welcome to Eddie Podcast. Welcome to the Eddie Podcast. Welcome to the Eddie Podcast.
Hi, I'm Leslie Gray Streeter of the Palm Beach Post and author of the book Black Widow, here on Eddie's podcast. You should hear it. It's really cool.